To begin this introduction to chapter 2 and the essentially the first half plus of our course, I'm going to just talk in general about the theory of consumer choice. And what we're going to try to do is think about a framework, a way of understanding how consumers allocate incomes among different goods in order to maximize their well-being. In other words, how they choose goods and services to do the best for themselves given their income constraints. And I've listed some examples here just to give you a flavor of the kind of idea that we have in mind. First example is thinking of a company like Nissan, who has a product, say the Altima, the four-door sedan, and they're saying, okay, we're going to add some additional product, such as an autonomous lane keeping assistance feature. Well, consumers ought to be willing to pay more for that product, but how, for the product that has that feature, but how much more? Another example is this Pepsi Coke example. Say in 1 week, Pepsi says, well, we're going to drop the price. We're having a promotion. It's a 20% reduction. It's at a wholesale price. And so the grocery store is going to drop the price retail as well by 20% or some near approximation. You think, okay, what's going to happen there? How many people are how much space should be allocated to Pepsi? What kind of inventory should I have on hand for that? Another example is, suppose you're an analyst for the Congressional Budget Office and you're asked to do a study of, say, food stamp programs. And you're asked to SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Programs. And you're asked to try to figure out the extent to which this prompts people to buy more food as opposed to buying the same amount of food and just subsidizing that food. Another example is, say you're at the State Department or you're at a non-governmental organization and you're looking and you're saying, okay, what's going to happen to consumption patterns as an economy grows, as it experiences increases in incomes? We all know that from month to month, year to year, prices change. And quantities, relative prices change, and quantities change as well. How would we attempt to accurately measure or estimate the change in welfare due to those price changes? We're going to talk a lot about taxes in this course, excise taxes, income taxes, progressive consumption taxes. We're going to talk especially about excise taxes, but we'll touch on the others as well. And and we'll always ask in these circumstances, hey, what kind of welfare implications does this have? One particular example is, implementing a carbon tax, but rebating the tax to consumers. All right. So in a particular way of modeling, can we say whether that leaves consumers the same or better off or worse off in terms of just their personal situation, not taking into account the addressing climate change? Another great example is several years ago, Volkswagen was discovered to be egregiously violating clean air standards when in their Jetta, Passat, various Audi vehicles, the Porsche vehicles as well, these diesel engines had a defeat device so that when it detected it was being tested for emissions, it operated one way. But then on the open road, it operated a completely different way that led to emissions of 40 times as much nitrogen oxide as the air standard allowed. So you could think of this as an externality, but you also might think of this as here we have individuals who bought this vehicle under a certain representation of the vehicle, but those representation of features were deceitful. How should we address that? How much were they harmed? Another point as we go into this approach is to think about the assumptions, the philosophical underpinnings of our approach. Uh, our course studies choices made by individual consumers and producers to determine how those individual choices determine the quantity sold and prices of goods and services, along with technology and resources, scarcity of resources. And a really easy way to understand is to say economics is the study of how people make the best of things, how people make choices subject to constraints, and then, of course, the implications of that behavior. In that approach, there's a fundamental assumption that is non-paternalism. So when we say something like people make the best of things given their circumstances, given the limitations imposed on them, well then, if they're making the best of things, it must be given their preferences, not my preferences, not a politician's preferences, not your mom's preferences, but your preferences. So that is a bedrock assumption for economists. It's people's own preferences that matters. Individuals know their own interests best. And so when we're going to try to answer a question like, how can we say that individuals are unambiguously better off or worse off in the face of some change? Well, we are going to need to have a perspective on that. By what standard? And it's the individual's preferences, that standard and that judgment that is key to our evaluation. So preferences and valuations of the individual are fundamental. It's not our opinions. Our opinions don't about what they should want or value aren't relevant. And I'll just in this little section, in this little section on non-paternalism by just giving an example. So here is an organization called Heifer, and in my family, when my wife and I were trying to get our kids interested in and learn about charitable donations, we would always have, allocate a certain amount of the budget for presents at Christmas to giving to Heifer, and then the kids would decide what animals they would like to give, and they chip in as well. And so the idea of Heifer is that they transfer to individuals in South America, Africa, the Middle East, various places where people are impoverished, South Asia. They transfer to them an animal and a certain amount of training so that they can sell products from that animal. And so you can look at this and you can say, oh, well, yeah, we could buy a flock of chicks for this country, or or we could buy a goat in this country, or rabbits here. So we could do this, right? So it's a neat idea. It certainly attracted the attention of my children, but it's highly paternalistic, right? Do you see that? That you're saying, well, we know what's best for you. We're going to come and we're going to tell you what animal, right? We're going to give you this animal. We're going to provide training on how you're supposed to do this animal. We're going to oversee you. The non-paternalism approach says, if you want to help people, give them money. Just give them money. They know what to do with it. What would be best for them to do with that, with those resources. Last little point here. Hey, when we're going forward, we're going to do this consumer theory in various steps. First we're going to establish the theory, draw implications, etc. But to establish the theory, we're going to study the consumer's budget constraint. That's the set of feasible consumption bundles. And we're going to recognize that a key distinction from the beginning of this course is that there are elements of consumer's choice problem that are objective and similar for most goods. For all of us, we all face same or very similar prices. But there's another essential element their own preferences that are subjective and individual. And so we can have two individuals who are otherwise have the same income, they face the same prices, but they end up making very different choices.